In this video, we're going to build the materials we need for this scene. We've imported our geometry, we've laid it out, we've brought in our camera, everything's working fine. Now we want to start bringing in our textures and then make our materials. So we have our texture folder, and we're going to start importing our texture files into there. So I'm going to go to Import, and I'm going to go to Exercise Files, Chapter 3, Textures. And I have a couple, as you can see, very simple textures for our different objects in here. I'm just going to import all of these. I'm going to Shift Select. We got 10 of them. Let's bring them all in. All right, now we're going to start building materials. Let's start with the material for the bottle. So a couple things in the outliner. First, I'm going to reorganize my scene. So we have our objects kind of categorized a little bit. So I'm going to create a new folder in here by right-clicking, and I'm going to make a folder called Geo. I'm going to grab my geometry elements and drag them into there, put my bottle in there, rings and the tube. Okay. So now all my geometry elements live in there. I'm going to make a new folder called Util. And this is just going to have some of the default utility objects that Unreal automatically puts in the scene for you. So just grab all these guys here and put them in there. Okay. So now as you can see, everything's just nice and clean in our little outliner here. So I'm going to select everything but the bottle geometry-wise. And then on my details pane, I'm going to go over to visible and just turn them off. Okay. I'm going to grab my bottle, hit F to frame it. Cool. So now we're just working with our one object the way we want to be. Go back to my content browser. I'll go over to my materials folder, right click here and create a new material. And I'll call it bottle mat. Okay, let's open that up. Okay, so we open up our bottle material and we want to make some parameters. For this one, we have a texture for the base color, and we're just going to use scalar parameters to set everything else. So I'm going to right click, type parameter. Go to Texture Sample Parameter 2D, as we've seen as just our simple file importer. In our details, I'll call it base color. So we're going to make it nice and smaller and more human readable. So we wire base color into base color. And now under its texture swatch, I'm going to go to Bottle 01 color, and that's our bottle color. Okay, now I'm going to right click on our grid, type parameter again, and we're going to go to a scalar parameter. We're going to call this one metallic. We're going to copy and paste it. We're going to call the next one specular. And we're going to copy and paste it. And we're going to call this last one roughness. Okay, so we're going to wire metallic to metallic, spec to specular, and roughness to roughness. For this particular material, we want metallic to be 0.5. So I'll select metallic and under default value, go 0.5. Specular is going to be 0.5 for all of these. And then roughness for the bottle is going to be 0.2, just to give it a little bit of blurriness. There we go. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to save the bottle mat, close out of here. We have our bottle selected in our viewport. And under our materials here, you can see we have two elements. And that is because the way that sometimes the FBX files come in, because this is actually separated into a bottle and a bottle cap under the hood, sometimes you'll get your elements separated out, so you could assign different materials to them. The way this is set up, all the UVs are laid out properly so we can assign the same material to everything. So I'm going to go under element 1, bottle mat, and element 2, bottle mat. And there we go. So now we have our bottle material on our object. Okay, let's keep moving on down the line. We're going to create a material for the panel cage. So let's go to our outliner. Let's take our bottle, let's turn it off. Go rendering visible, turn that off. Go to our panel cages, select both of those, and we're going to turn those on. Okay, so we want to create materials for these. All right, so what we're going to do is under our content browser, I'm going to right click on my bottle mat and duplicate it so we can use some of the work we started with. I'm going to call this cage mat. Open this up. Okay, for this, we're not going to have a texture file that's driving the base color. We're just going to set a color manually. So I'm going to take this base color and delete it out. Select it, delete it. Now I'm going to right click, type parameter again to get our parameters, and we want a vector parameter for our color. Okay, so I'll call this base color for good measure, and I'm going to wire this into base color. Okay, straightforward, easy. So for the cage, we're going to leave the color at 0. We'll leave it black. For metallic, 0.5. Specular, we'll leave it at 0.5. And honestly, for roughness, we can leave it at 0.2. So really simple, that's it. We're not going to change anything else for this guy. All right, we're going to close this, grab our cage mat, both of these, Go to materials, select cage matte. We can see those update. Great, those are done. So now we're going to go to our world outliner, select our panel cages, and scroll down here, and we're just going to turn these off. Okay, now it's time. Let's do our panels. So I'm going to select both of those in our outliner, and let's make them visible. Okay, so this is our panel setup. So let's make a material for these. Okay, so let's go look at our content browser and look at our textures. And for the panels, we actually have 1, 2, 3, 4 texture maps. We have color, emission, metallic, and roughness. So we're going to have some more files for this material. All right, so I'm going to go to my material, go to my bottle mat again. I'm going to right click and duplicate it so we can start at least with a bit of a template. And I'm going to have this be panel mat. Open this up. Okay, so our base color, I'll select that, and now I'll go over to our texture swatch here, and we'll choose panel 1 color. Now I'm going to delete out the metallic and roughness scalar parameters. We can leave the specular one, but we want more file inputs for our other shader properties. So I'll select this base color file input node, copy it and paste it. I'll call this one metallic over here in the parameter name. And I'll wire this into metallic. And now with that selected, we'll go over here and we'll find the panels 1 metallic, and there we go. Okay, now I'm going to copy and paste this again into our material editor. I'm going to call this one roughness. I'm going to wire it into the roughness. And we're going to go over to our texture swatch and select panels 1 roughness. And you can see that there's actually a little bit more of a texture on there that is modulating the glossiness of our shader ball. Okay, so now with our roughness selected, I'm going to copy and paste this, and we're going to call this one emission, because we're also going to emit from some of the elements of the geometry. So I'm going to wire this to the emissive color slot. Let's pull this over a little bit, and I'm going to select the texture panel 1 emission. Cool, and you can see there's a little kind of green stripe there that matches up with where the UVs on the object are. Okay, let's save this out. Okay, now with both of my panels pieces of geometry selected, I'm going to go over to our details, scroll up, let's find the element under materials that these are, and I will select my panel mat, assign those, and there we go, right on. Cool, so you can see also that our scene is a little bit dark. It's kind of hard to see some of these updates right now. So I'm going to go over to our world outliner and see we have no skylight in there. And a skylight can be often a good way just to see things just kind of cheap and easy. So I'm going to go to our modes, go to lights, select skylight, and drag this into the scene. I'm going to make the location 0, 0, 1000 just to put it somewhere. And let's jack the intensity up to like 3. Cool. So now we can see this a little bit better. We can see that we start to have some texture on these objects. And because everything is UV'd in the right way, we have some special parts of it that are doing different things. Like we have these little lights on the edge that are going to emit light. All right, cool. So we've set up our material properly for those. Let's keep going. Then go to my outliner. I'm going to select my panels. On the right side here in details, we are going to turn off visible. Select our platform and let's make that visible. Just doing these one at a time. Okay. All right, so let's go to our content browser and let's take the panel mat and let's right click on it and let's duplicate that. So we're going to call this platform. Okay, let's open that up. Let's actually close this really quickly. Let's go back to our textures to make sure what we have here. So we've got a platform, color, emission, metallic, and roughness. Very similar to our panel, so that's good. We're going to open up our platform mat. So for this one, because we have the exact same set of texture maps, we don't actually need to change any of this now. We're going to select the base color, select platform 1 color, go to metallic, select platform 1 metallic, go to roughness, select platform 1 roughness, and go to emission and select platform 1 emission. Great, so we've just changed the texture maps for this shader. That's great. Save this out and close it. Okay, so now with the platform selected in our viewport, we're going to scroll up here on our details and go materials and select platform mat. And voila, there we go. Cool. So, we have a few little bit of different colors on this guy and some emissive areas and some metallic areas. Easy. Okay, so our platform has now been shaded properly. So let's go and let's turn that off. Let's move down the line here. Let's go to our outliner. Let's grab our rings. Let's make those visible. Let's go again to our content browser and we can see what textures we have for the rings. We have an emission texture. So everything else is going to be a scalar value or a vector value, and then the emissions will actually be a file texture. Okay, so I'm going to go over here to my materials. We are going to right click on our platform mat, duplicate it. We're going to call it rings mat. I'm going to open this up. Okay, we're actually going to delete out base color, metallic, and roughness. Let's move specular up here. Let's move emission up here. I'm going to change this texture to rings emission. Now I'm going to grab my specular parameter. I'm going to copy and paste it, put it underneath, retitle it roughness, wire it into roughness. And we're going to set that to 0.2. I'm going to copy and paste this again in my material editor. I'm going to wire this into metallic. I'm going to call it metallic. And I'm going to set the value of that to 0.5. And finally, for the color, we're going to create a vector parameter. So I'm going to right click here, type parameter, and we're going to choose a vector parameter. I'm going to wire this into base color. I'm going to make this a darker green for now. So let's go with, 0.16 for the R, 0.4 for the G, and 0.1 for the B. Okay. Say OK. And we're going to save out the rings material, and we're going to close this. Now with our rings selected in the viewport, we're going to scroll up here, and under where it says materials element 0, we're going to assign the rings material. So now we have our rings that are this green color, and you can see that there's this emissive stripe on part of them that has been set by that file texture. Okay, so now we've isolated individual objects, and we're going to do finally that with the tube. So with the rings selected, I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to grab the tube. I'm going to turn on that. Okay. So for the tube, we're going to create a different kind of material. We're going to create actually like a transparent glassy material, which is pretty amazing that we can do in real time in here. And there's caveats as there are with anything else, but it's a really nice effect. So we're going to go to our content browser. I'm going to go to my materials. Let's go to our rings mat. I'm going to right click on that and duplicate it. I'm going to call this tube mat. Okay. So we're not going to use any file textures for this guy. So we're going to just click emission and delete it out, right? We're going to select this vector parameter up here. I actually forgot to title it before, but now we'll just call this base color. And I'm going to set its value to white, pure white. So we're going to do 1, 1, and 1 on the RG and B. Okay, so for its metallic, we're going to set it to 0.25 this time. For its spec, we're going to leave it at 0.5. The roughness, we're going to set to 0. And now we're going to make some more scalar parameters. I'm going to grab this roughness, copy and paste it 2 more times. I'm going to select one of them, and I'm going to call it opacity. So I'm going to wire the opacity into the opacity field, and you can see that that's grayed out, and we're going to fix that, and I'll show you that in a minute because we need to change another property of the material for that to work right. Okay, and then finally we're going to select this roughness thing that we'd copied, and we're going to call this refraction. And we're going to wire that into the refraction input. And again, you see that's grayed out, but we're going to fix that in a second as we change this. So I'm going to select the tube material, and you can see that its blend mode is opaque. We're going to change this to translucent, and you can see that now the opacity and refraction parameters are going to work. Actually, let's just set these really quick too. We're going to set opacity to 0.5, and we're going to set refraction to 0.9. We're going to select this material again, and we're going to change one other thing. Under the translucency section, we're going to change it to surface per pixel. These are just sort of different kinds of lighting modes, and this stuff can get very technical and under the hood. But you saw before we did that we didn't have everything available. We had the opacity and refraction that became available, but then metallic, specular, and roughness got grayed out. So by changing the lighting mode to the proper thing we want, which is surface per pixel, then we get access to all those things again. We're not going to get into too much of the underhood technical shading differences between different types of materials for different things. This is a whole world unto itself. We're just trying to make some basic, useful materials that I think will be great for you to get started with, and you can continue exploring from here. Okay, so now I'm going to save this tube material. Let's close this out. So with the tube selected here, we're going to go to its material, and we're going to select tube mat. And now you can see we kind of have this glassy, transparent material. Nice. Okay, so now we're going to go to our world outliner and turn everything back on. So we're going to select all of our geometry and we're going to scroll down here in our details and we're going to turn everything on. All right, so now I'm just going to hit play. Our lighting isn't set up, our other looks aren't set up, but at least now we can start to see our shot with our different materials, and this is starting to look cool. Okay, so now we've seen how to make our materials for this shot, how to build some basic materials, both using file textures and using different scalar and vector parameters to make some basic, simple, useful materials very easy. Obviously, the material editor in Unreal goes very deep and there's tons of nodes and tons of techniques for doing different things, but this is a good way just to see how to get up and running pretty quickly and to make your scenes start to look good. Next, we're going to move on to lighting and we'll continue on to then post-processing and rendering this shot out.